We talk about Brexit, and I'm a Brexiteer, a passionate Brexiteer, but we very rarely talk about Frexit. In fact, many people in this country, maybe most people, have never heard of Frexit. I think it's conveniently not covered by the so-called mainstream media in this country because a section of the media, or the mainstream media, a lot of people seem to want us to think that we're the bad ones. We're the disobedient, disrespectful, rebellious ones in Europe. We the rest of Europe is against us because we've done a very bad, antisocial, naughty thing in leaving the EU and having our Brexit, and so Britain's the odd one out. Britain's the bad one, and it's Britain against the rest of Europe, and we're the odd one out. And actually, excuse me, this is really, really dishonest, and this is really manipulative and really bad because there's a growing movement in France for Frexit. I should have explained what Frexit was at the beginning. France exit. There's a growing movement for a French Brexit in France, which you hardly ever hear about over here. It's getting bigger and bigger. It's been around for a while. Many French people want out of the EU, even if they're scared to actually go through with it, and they're scared of what it actually entails and how obviously long and drawn out and complicated it is. But many French people want out of the EU. Many French people admire the UK for what we've done and are envious of us and want to do the same. They want a Frexit. There are protests in Paris all the time for Frexit, mainly involving what I suppose, again, the mainstream media would label far-right people. They're not far-right at all, they're just ordinary people. But yeah, Frexit is a growing movement. So no, it's not Britain on its own. We're not the bad ones, we're not the rebellious ones, it's not Europe against us. Loads of other people in all over Europe want to come out of the EU. There are movements in every country. France, obviously, one of the bigger powerhouses in the European Union, one of the big major powerhouses. It's worth mentioning them in particular because they're so powerful within the EU. France, Germany, and Britain were so powerful, the big powerhouses, and they want Frexit. Many of them do. More and more French people want Frexit, especially many, for example, French farmers who absolutely detest the EU now. Many French farmers do. So no, we're not on our own. It's not just Britain. And if France come out of the EU or threaten to, or slowly move towards that, then will there even be an EU left? What will the EU be without Britain and France, two of the big powerhouses? What will be left? How can the EU go on? And it's you could argue if Britain and France have both gone. So yeah, let's talk about Frexit. It's hardly mentioned over here, but there's a big movement for Frexit in France. We're not on our own, and many French people admire and respect what we've done in theory anyway. It hasn't been carried out very well. Politicians haven't carried out and implemented what Brexiteers voted for and asked for. So in my view, it's not Brexit that's the problem, it's the fact that it hasn't been implemented, hasn't been carried out properly according to what people wanted. And, the EU is in severe trouble. It's crumbling. It's fighting for survival because the movements to come out of the EU are getting stronger and bigger across Europe. For example, particularly, as I mentioned, in France, who are becoming more and more Frexit-minded. So when we talk about going back into the EU, which would be completely immoral anyway, I can't believe we're even talking about that. It's absolutely obscenely immoral to even suggest such a thing. So when we talk about going back into the EU, what EU are we talking about? Why would we be going back to a sinking ship? My view entirely. Obviously, please challenge me. All opinions welcome. Healthy debate always welcome. But in my view, it's a sinking ship on the way out, crumbling, declining. So what EU are we talking about going back into? Will there be an EU to go back into? It would just be very temporary and transitory and superficial, wouldn't it? If the forces against EU are getting stronger and movements like Frexit in France are getting stronger, then what EU are we going back into? What are we talking about? Will there even be an EU to go back into? Will it still exist? What EU are we talking about? Are we going back to something which is sinking, or talking about going back into something which is a sinking ship? Doesn't make sense to me. But obviously, please challenge me. Let's have heated debate, as Mrs. Merton used to say. But yeah, those two things puzzle and frustrate me intensely. Talking about Britain being the bad one, and it's Europe against us, and all the European countries are against us, and we've done a terrible thing, when there are people all over Europe that want out of the EU. And particularly in France, there's a Frexit movement which hardly gets talked about, I don't believe, or hardly mentioned over here. And I think that's very convenient, and I think that's deliberate. It would be talked about more if we were looking for a balanced discussion on Brexit. We would mention this force for Frexit as well. But no. A lot of people want us to think that we're the bad guys and we've done a terrible thing and we're not cooperating and we're not behaving ourselves. No, many French people are happy with what we've done, congratulate us and envy us on what we've done. And what EU are we talking about when we talk about going back into the EU? It looks to me as if it's a sinking ship, unless it's massively downsized, massively reformed and cleaned up. To me, it's a sinking ship. But of course, as always, what do you think? We're talking Frexit and whether the EU will even be there, whether there will even be an EU that exists to go back into. And in your view, isn't it obscene and immoral that some politicians or people can even talk about going back in and reversing what's been done? I can't believe this is happening.